The Dassault Mirage III is a family of single-seat, single-engine fighter aircraft produced by Dassault Aviation for the French Air Force and widely exported. Prominent operators included Argentina, Australia, South Africa, Pakistan and Israel, as well as a number of non-aligned nations. Though an older design, the second-generation fighter is a fairly maneuverable aircraft and an effective opponent in close-range dogfighting. In French service it was armed with air-to-ground ordnance or R.550 Magic air-to-air missiles. The versatility of the design enabled production of trainer, reconnaissance and ground attack versions as well as the Dassault Mirage V, Dassault Mirage III and Atlas Cheetah variants. A Mirage III was the first Western European combat aircraft to exceed Mach 2 in horizontal flight. Development. Origins. The Mirage III family grew out of French government studies began in 1952 that led in early 1953 to a specification for a lightweight, all-weather interceptor capable of climbing to 18,000 meters in 6 minutes and able to reach Mach 1.3 in level flight. Dassault's response to the specification was the MD 550 Magic Delta, a diminutive and sleek jet that was to be powered by two 9.61 kN Armstrong Siddeley MD-30R Viper afterburning turbojets, with a SEPR-66 liquid fuel rocket engine to provide boost thrust of 4.7 kN. The aircraft had a tailless delta configuration, with 5% thickness and 60-degree sweep. The tailless delta configuration has a number of limitations. The lack of a horizontal stabilizer meant flaps cannot be used, resulting in a long takeoff run and a high landing speed. The delta wing itself limits maneuverability, and suffers from buffeting at low altitude, due to the large wing area and resulting low wing loading. However, the delta is a simple and pleasing design, easily built and robust, capable of high speed in a straight line, and with plenty of space in the wing for fuel storage. The first prototype of the Magic Delta, without afterburning engines, a rocket motor and with an unusually large vertical stabilizer, flew on the 25th of June 1955. After a redesign, the vertical stabilizer was reduced in size, afterburners and a rocket motor were installed. It was renamed to Mirage I. In late 1955, the prototype attained Mach 1.3 in level flight without rocket assist, and Mach 1.6 with the rocket. The small size of the Mirage I restricted its armament to a single air-to-air missile, and it was decided during flight trials that it was too small for a useful armament load. After trials, the Mirage I prototype was eventually scrapped. Dassault considered an enlarged version, the Mirage II, with a pair of turbo-Mecha-Gabazo turbojets. However, the Mirage II remained unbuilt as it was bypassed for a more ambitious design that was 30% heavier than the Mirage I and was powered by the new SNECMA-ATAR afterburning turbojet with thrust of 43.2 kN. The ATAR was an axial flow turbojet, derived from the German World War II BMW 003 design. The new fighter was named the Mirage III. It incorporated the new area ruling concept, where changes to an aircraft's cross-section were made as gradual as possible, resulting in the famous wasp waist configuration of many supersonic fighters. Like the Mirage I, the Mirage III had provision for a booster rocket engine. The prototype Mirage III flew on the 17th of November 1956, and attained a speed of Mach 1.52 on its 10th flight. The prototype was then fitted with manually operated intake half-cone shock diffusers, known as Saurus, which were moved forward as speed increased to reduce inlet turbulence, which increased speed to Mach 1.65, while use of the supplemental SEPR-66 rocket allowed speed of Mach 1.8 to be reached in September 1957. The success of the Mirage III prototype resulted in an order for 10 pre-production Mirage III fighters. These were almost 2 meters longer than the Mirage III prototype, had a wing with 17.3% more area, a chord reduced to 4.5%, and an ATAR-09B turbojet with afterburning thrust of 58.9 kilonewtons. The SEPR-841 rocket engine was retained. It was also fitted with Thomson CSF Serrano Ibis air intercept radar, operational avionics, and a drag chute, a short-in landing roll. The first Mirage III flew in May 1958, and eventually was clocked at Mach 2.2, becoming the first European aircraft to exceed Mach 2 in level flight. The 10th III was rolled out in December 1959. One was fitted with a Rolls-Royce Avon 67 engine with thrust of 71.1 kilonewtons as a test model for Australian evaluation, with the name Mirage EIO. This variant flew in February 1961, but the Avon power plant was not adopted. Mirage IIC in Mirage IIB, the first major production model, the Mirage IIC, first flew in October 1960. The IIC was largely similar to the IIIA, being less than a half meter longer and having a full operational fit. The IIC was a single-seat interceptor with an ATAR-09B turbojet engine, featuring an eyelet-style variable exhaust. The Mirage IIC was armed with twin 30mm DEFA cannon fitted in the belly with the gun ports under the air intakes. Early Mirage IIC production had 3 stores pylons, one under the fuselage and one under each wing. Another outboard pylon was soon added to each wing, for a total of 5, excluding a sleek supersonic tank which also had bomb-carrying capacity. The outboard pylon was intended to carry an AIM-9B Sidewinder air-to-air missile, later replaced by the Matra R.550 Magic, and also was armed with the radar-guided Matra R.530 missile on the centerline pylon. Although provision for the rocket engine was retained, by this time the day of the high-altitude bomber seemed to be over, and the SEPR rocket engine was rarely or never fitted in practice. In the first place, it required removal of the aircraft's cannon, and in the second, apparently it had a reputation for setting the aircraft on fire. The space for the rocket engine was used for additional fuel, and the rocket nozzle was replaced by a ventral fin at first, and an airfield arresting assembly later. A total of 95 Mirage IICs were obtained by the French Air Force, with initial operational deliveries in July 1961. The Mirage IIC remained in service with the ADRA until 1988. The ARME Écoute de l'Air also ordered a 2-seat Mirage IIB operational trainer, which first flew in October 1959. The fuselage was stretched about a meter and both cannon were removed to accommodate the second seat. The IIB had no radar, and provision for the SEPR rocket was deleted, although it could carry external stores. The ADA ordered 63 Mirage IIBs, including 5 Mirage IIB-1 trials aircraft, 10 Mirage IIB-2 in-flight refueling trainers with dummy nose probes, used for training Mirage EVA bomber pilots, and 20 Mirage IIBs with the engine and some other features of the multi-role Mirage AIE. 1. Mirage AIB was fitted with a fly-by-wire flight control system in the mid-1970s and redesignated Mirage AIBSV. It was used as a test bed for the system in the later Mirage 2000. Mirage AIE. While the Mirage AIC was being put into production, Dassault was also considering a multi-role strike variant of the aircraft, which eventually materialized as the Mirage AIE. The first of 3 prototypes flew on the 1st of April 1961. The Mirage AIE differed from the IIIC Interceptor most obviously in having a 300 mm forward fuselage extension to increase the size of the avionics bay behind the cockpit. The stretch also helped to increase fuel capacity, as the Mirage AIC had marginal range and improvements were needed. The stretch was small and hard to notice, but the clue is at the bottom edge of the canopy on the Mirage AIE ends directly above the top lip of the air intake, while on the IIIC it ends behind the lip. Many Mirage AIEs were fitted with the Marconi continuous wave Doppler navigation radar radome on the bottom of the fuselage. Under the cockpit, no IIICs had this feature. A similar inconsistent variation was the presence or absence of an HF antenna fitted as a forward extension to the vertical tailplane on some Mirages. The leading edge of the tailplane was a straight line, while on those with the HF antenna the leading edge had a sloping extension forward. The extension appears to have been generally standard on production Mirage AIAs and Mirage AICs, but only appeared in some of the Mirage AIE's export versions. The IIE featured Thomson CSF Serrano 2 dual-mode ground radar, a radar warning receiver system with the antennas mounted in the vertical tailplane, and an ATAR-09C engine, with a pedal-style variable exhaust. The first production Mirage AIE was delivered to the ADA in January 1964, and a total of 192 were eventually delivered to the service. Total production of the Mirage AIE, including exports, was substantially larger than that of the Mirage AIC, including exports, totaling 523 aircraft. In the mid-1960s, one Mirage AIE was fitted with the improved SNECMA ATAR-09 K6 turbojet for trials, and given the confusing designation of Mirage AIC-2. Mirage AIR. A number of reconnaissance variants were built under the general designation of Mirage AIR. These aircraft had a Mirage AIE airframe, Mirage AIC avionics, a camera nose and unsurprisingly no radar, and retained the twin DEFA cannon and external stores capability. The camera nose accommodated up to 5 OMERA cameras. The ADA obtained 50 production Mirage AIRs, not including 2 prototypes. The Mirage AIR preceded the Mirage AIE in operational introduction. The ADA also obtained 20 improved Mirage AIRD reconnaissance variants, essentially a Mirage AIR with an extra panoramic camera in the most forward nose position, and the Doppler radar and other avionics from the Mirage AIE. Exports and license production. Exports. The largest export customers for Mirage AICs built in France were Israel as the Mirage AICJ and South Africa as the Mirage AICZ. Some export customers obtained the Mirage AIB, with designations only changed to provide a country code, such as Mirage AIDA for Argentina, Mirage AIDBR and Mirage AIDBR2 for Brazil, Mirage AIBJ for Israel, Mirage AIDL for Lebanon, Mirage AIDP for Pakistan, Mirage AIBZ and Mirage AIDZ and Mirage AIID-2Z for South Africa, Mirage AIIDE for Spain and Mirage AIIDV for Venezuela. After the outstanding Israeli success with the Mirage AIIC, scoring kills against Syrian Miko Yangurovich MiG-17s and MiG-21 aircraft and then achieving a formidable victory against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria in the Six-Day War of June 1967, the Mirage AII's reputation was greatly enhanced. The combat-proven image and low cost made it a popular export success. The aircraft remained a formidable weapon in the hands of the Pakistan Air Force in No. 5 Squadron, which was fully operational by the 1971 war, flying out from Sargodha, along with a detachment in Manwali. These were extensively used for ground attacks. No Mirage was lost in the war. The Mirage fleet is currently being modified to accommodate aerial refueling and to carry H-80F-8 cruise missiles. In wake of delays from JF-17 Thunder, aging Mirage AIIs continues to serve in Pakistan Air Force. A good number of AIIs were built for export as well, being purchased in small numbers by Argentina as the Mirage AIIA and Mirage AIIBR. Brazil has the Mirage AIIBR, Lebanon as the Mirage AIIEL, Pakistan as the Mirage AIIEP, South Africa as the Mirage AIIEZ, Spain as the Mirage AIIE, and Venezuela as the Mirage AIIEV, with a list of sub-variant designations, with minor variations in equipment fit. Dassault believed the customer was always right, and was happy to accommodate changes in equipment fit as customer needs and budget required. Pakistani Mirage 5PA3, for example, were fitted with Thomson CSF-AGV radar with capability of guiding the Exocet anti-ship missile. Some customers obtained the two-seat Mirage AIIBE under the general designation Mirage AIID, though the trainers were generally similar to the Mirage AIIBE except for minor changes in equipment fit. In some cases they were identical, since two surplus Ada Mirage AIIBEs were sold to Brazil under the designation Mirage AIIBBR, and 3 were similarly sold to Egypt under the designation Mirage 5 SDD. New build exports of this type included aircraft sold to Abu Dhabi, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Egypt, Gabon, Libya, Pakistan, Peru, Spain, Venezuela, and Zaire. Export versions of the Mirage AIR were built for Pakistan as the Mirage AIRP and South Africa as the Mirage AIRZ, and Mirage AIR2Z with an ATAR-9K50 jet engine. Export versions of the AIR Recce aircraft were purchased by Abu Dhabi, Belgique, Colombia, Egypt, Libya, Pakistan, and South Africa. Some export Mirage AIRDs were fitted with British Vinton cameras, not OMERA cameras. Most of the Belgian aircraft were built locally. Israel. The Israeli Air Force purchased 3 variants of the Mirage III. 70 Mirage AICJ single-seat fighters, received between April 1962 and July 1964. 2 Mirage AIRJ single-seat photo reconnaissance aircraft, received in March 1964. 4 Mirage AIBJ two-seat combat trainers, 3 received in 1966 and 1 in 1968. Israel was forced into updating its own Mirages when France imposed an arms embargo on the region after the 1967 Six-Day War. The result was Israel Aircraft Industries II, based on the Mirage 5. Nevertheless, Mirage AIIB upgrades up to and including a full KFIR type conversion are also available from II. Pakistan purchased 24 Mirage AIIE from France in 1967. The total Pakistani Air Force order also included 3 Mirage AIR and 3 Mirage AID. An additional 10 Mirage AIR were delivered in 1977. When French production of the aircraft ceased, Pakistan deferred to Australia and Lebanon, acquiring another 54 Mirage AIE and 1 Mirage AIB. These have been modified to accept the Italian-made Grifo M3 radar and Chinese-placed 12 air-to-air missiles from the Kakpak JF-17 Thunder. Licensed production. The Mirage AIE was also built under license in Australia and Switzerland. Australia, while an experimental Rolls-Royce Avon-powered version did not enter production. The Australian government decided that the Royal Australian Air Force would receive the IIE, albeit a variant assembled by the government aircraft factories in Fisherman's Bend, Melbourne from Australian-made components, under the designation Mirage EIO. The major difference between the IIE and the IIO was the avionics installed. The other major Australian aircraft manufacturer at the time, the Commonwealth Aircraft Corporation, also in Melbourne, built the SNE CMA-ATAR engine. GAF produced 3 variants: the Mirage AIO, which was an interceptor, the Mirage AIO, a surface attack aircraft, and the twin-seat Mirage AIO, a fighter lead-in trainer. Dassault produced 2 sample AIO aircraft, with the first flying in March 1963. GAF completed 48 IIO, 50 IIO and 16 IIO aircraft. All the surviving Mirage IIO aircraft were converted to IIO standard between 1967 and 1979. The Mirage was finally withdrawn from RAF service in 1988, and 50 surviving examples were sold to Pakistan in 1990. Several examples are preserved in museums around Australia, and at least one is currently under restoration to airworthy condition. South Africa. Much like Israel, South Africa was similarly isolated by a French arms embargo after the passage of United Nations Security Council Resolution 418. The South African Air Force launched an ambitious rebuild program for its Mirage III fleet, soliciting Israeli technical assistance to convert existing airframes into the Atlas Cheetah. Fixed 4 planes distinguished the Cheetah from its Mirage predecessor, and an extended nose, probably inspired by the IIKFIR, houses a modified electronics suite, including radar, built-in single-seat, 2-seat interceptor, and 2-seat combat trainer versions. Atlas Cheetahs entered service in 1987 during the South African Border War. Armament consists of Denel Kukria data heat-seeking air-to-air missiles, aided by a pilot's helmet-mounted sight. Switzerland. In 1961, Switzerland bought a single Mirage AIC from France. This Mirage AIC was used as development aircraft. The Swiss Mirages were built in Switzerland by F+WM as the Mirage AIS. Australia too bought 1 French-made aircraft in preparation for licensed production. Cost overruns during the Swiss production led to the so-called Mirage affair. In all, 36 Mirage AIS interceptors were built with strengthened wings, airframe, and undercarriage. The Swiss Air Force required robustness comparable to that of carrier-based planes. The airframes were reinforced so the aircraft could be moved by lifting them over other aircraft with a crane. As the aircraft caverns in the mountains that Swiss Air Force uses as bunkers offer very little space to maneuver parked aircraft. The strengthened frames allowed for JATO capability. The main differences to the standard Mirage III were as follows: new US avionics with changed cockpit design with gray instead of black panels. New U.S. radar, Taran 18 from Hughes Aircraft Company. Use of HM-55S Falcon, which is similar to the Hughes AIM-26 Falcon. Radar warning receiver on both wingtips and on the back of the rudder. Strength and structure for use of J-80 rockets. Retractable nose cone and lengthened nosewheel leg for storing in aircraft cavern. 4 lifting points for moving aircraft in underground caverns with a crane. Bay at the fin with a SEPR 841 rocket engine to double the velocity for short time a climb to 20,000 meters. USDRACOR and AL-40 chaff flare dispenser at the back under the end of the engine. Cannons designed and produced by RUAG Aerospace. New Martin Baker ejection seat. The Swiss Mirages are equipped with RWS chaff and amp flare dispensers. Avionics differed as well, with the most prominent difference being that the Thomson CSF Serrano 2 radar was replaced by Hughes Taran 18 system, giving the Mirage AIS compatibility with the Hughes AIM-4 Falcon arm. Also, the Mirage AIS had the wiring to carry a Swiss-built French nuclear bomb. The Swiss nuclear bomb was stocked in the pre-production stage and Switzerland did not purchase the French-made one. The Mirage AIS had an integral fuel tank under the aft B. This fuel tank could be removed and replaced with an adapter of the same shape. This adapter housed a SEPR rocket engine with its 300L nitric acid oxidizer tank. With the SEPR rocket, the Mirage AIS easily reached altitudes of 24,000 meters, an additional thrust of 1,500 kp. The SEPR could be switched off and on minimum 3 times in a flight. A maximum use of 80 seconds was possible. In case of an emergency, it was possible to jettison the SEPR unit in low-speed flight. The rocket fuel was very hazardous and highly toxic, so the SEPR rocket was not used very often. Special buildings for maintenance were built in books and pane, and the personnel had to wear special protective suits. The Mirage AIS could also carry a photo reconnaissance centerline pod and an integral fuel tank under the aft B. This carried a smaller fuel load but allowed a back-looking film camera to be added. In the early 1990s, the 30 surviving Swiss Mirage AIS interceptors were put through an upgrade program, which included fitting them with fixed cannons and updated avionics. The Mirage AIS were phased out of service in 1999. The remaining Mirage AIRS, BS and DS were taken out of service in 2003. Operational history. 6-Day War. Over the demilitarized zone on the Israeli side of the border with Syria, a total of 6 MiGs were shot down. The first day Mirages fought the MiGs. In the 6-Day War, apart from 12 Mirages left behind to guard Israel from Arab bombers, all the Mirages were fitted with bombs, and sent to attack the Arab air bases. However, the Mirage's performance as a bomber was modest. During the following days, Mirages performed as fighters, and out of a total of 58 Arab aircraft shot down in air combat during the war, 48 were accounted for by Mirages. Yom Kippur War. In the 1973 Yom Kippur War, the Mirage fleet engaged solely in air-to-air operations. ACIG.org claims that at least 26 Mirages and Neshes were lost in air-to-air combat during the war. Contrary to these claims, formal Israeli sources claim only 5 Israeli Air Force aircraft were shot down in air-to-air duels. 106 Syrian and Egyptian aircraft were claimed shot down by Israeli Mirage EICJ planes, and another 140 aircraft were claimed by the Nesher derivative, Jora Epstein, ace of aces of modern supersonic fighter jets and of the Israeli Air Force, won all his victories in Mirage EICJ and Nesher types. South African Border War. During the South African Border War, the South African Air Force operated 16 Mirage IICZ interceptors, 17 Mirage IIEZ multi-role fighter bombers, and 4 Mirage IIRZ reconnaissance fighters from bases in southwest Africa. Despite being recognized as an exceptional dogfighter, the Mirage III generally lacked the range to make it effective over long distances during strike operations against People's Liberation Army of Namibia insurgents in Angola. South African pilots also found landing the high-nosed, delta-winged Mirage III airframe difficult on rudimentary airstrips near the operational area. The Mirage IIs were eventually assigned to 2 squadron SAF and restricted to the secondary roles of daytime interception, training exercises, and photographic reconnaissance following the adoption of the Mirage F1. The mediocre performance of the fighter's Serrano 2 radar precluded operations at night and during poor weather. By the late 1980s, the Mirage IICZ was considered so obsolete that it was utilized only for base security. Nevertheless, Mirage IIRZs continued to be flown in photo reconnaissance missions over Angolan targets, as the only other SAF aircraft equipped for this role was the more antiquated English Electric Canberra. SAF Mirage IIRZs often flew at extremely low altitudes, sometimes down to 50 feet, then rapidly gained elevation to take the photographs. During the Battle of Quito Guanavale, they also carried out mock sorties over enemy positions in Zanongo and Humbay in an attempt to lure out Cuban MiG-21s and MiG-23s, which could then be engaged by the superior Mirage F1AZs. Falklands War. Argentine Air Force used the Mirage IIEA during the Falklands War. Their lack of aerial refueling capability and long distance from the bases dramatically reduced their ability as long-range strike aircraft. Even using 2 550-gallon drop tanks to carry extra fuel, the Mirages were flying at the absolute limit of the range to reach the British fleet. The fighters sent to engage the Harrier cap and cover the strike force would have no more than 5 minutes over the target area. The usual armament consisted of 1 Matrona of 530 or 2 Magic 1-day AMs. They only entered combat in one occasion, with one being shot down by an AIM-9L Sidewinder and other destroyed by friendly fire after attempting to land at Port Stanley when nearly out of fuel. They were extensively used on diversion flights, flying very high altitude, and baited the British with decoys, forced a response, and stretched their cap coverage to improve the chances of survival and success of the attack force. Some of them were also maintained in quick response alert against possible Avro-Vulcan raids on the mainland and against aggressive Chilean flights on the border.